Welcome back to our last panel on applied perspectives. The four speakers are with us, so we actually are going to use the entire 2 hours that we have, but we are a bit ahead of time. Our first speaker is Rana Rushdie from Dublin City University, and he will be presenting on formalizing UN-established international commercial procedures translation as a broker of world trade. You have 20 minutes.
Okay. Hello, everybody. First, I would like to start by thanking Aga Khan University, Dr. Gianluca and Dr. Nancy for giving me this great opportunity to be here today and meet distinguished experts in my field. I am truly privileged. And my research will discuss an aspect of translating international commercial law into the Arabic context. The title of my paper is Formalizing UN-Established International Commercial Procedures, Translation as a Broker of World Trade. The scope of my research is legal translation within law-making settings, such as the UN, versus non-legal contexts, such as everyday language use, the media and the press and academic context. And my case study is the translation of the international commercial terms, often abbreviated as the Incoterms. The significance of this research is that it discusses the role of translation in creating a shared discourse and laying down the laws of international commerce. Because recently there has been an increased interest in exploring how translation goes hand in hand with processes of knowledge production across the multifarious disciplines of human knowledge. And the most significant current discussions are centered around navigating manifestations of translation influence across activist networks, mainstream versus citizen media, and the contribution of translation towards accumulating literary capital. And of course, I have to mention the great effort conducted by the Genealogies of Knowledge team at the University of Manchester. And my research goes in line with this growing area of research by demonstrating the functionality of translation as an active agent in the framework of international organizations, and specifically the United Nations. So I would like to tell the story of the Incoterms and how they are translated. But first, let us look at the definition of the Incoterms. What are they? They are a set of international rules for the interpretation of the most commonly used trade terms in international trade. Examples are FOB, standing for free on board, FAS, standing for free alongside ship, and FCA, standing for free carrier, among many others. So the historical background about the Incoterms is that they first appeared in 1936 in an English original version, along with translations into French and Spanish only. And they have continued to witness modifications and additions in the years 1953, 1967, 1976, and 1980, until they evolved into mainstream rules that guarantee consistency and uniformity in the international sale of goods after the UN decided in the year 1990, and this is a crucial date, because the UN decided to generalize their application worldwide by translating them into several other languages, including Arabic. And now the functions of Incoterms, what are they used for? The Incoterms designate the duties assumed by contractual parties, namely stating the seller's obligation to place the goods at the disposal of the buyer, or hand them over for carriage, or deliver them at destination. And they also deal with the distribution of risk between the parties in these cases. And it's also important to note that the Incoterms were first and foremost put forward to deal with overseas sale transactions, but still they are sometimes used within the context of domestic trade. And the Incoterms witnessed important revisions in the year 2000 and 2010, following receiving recommendations and feedback from traders and users in the trade domain. But why did these recommendations take place? The revision in the year 2000 sought to accommodate the recent spread of custom-free zones, the increased use of electronic communications in business transactions, and changes in transport practices, while the following revision in the year 2010 took into consideration the increased use of intermodal transport by distinguishing the terms between terms to be used in any mode of transport and terms to be used in sea and inland water transport. So the main reason for conducting this revision is to render the Incoterms compatible with the status quo and the developments in the trade industry. And it's also important to note that in the year 2010, the number of Incoterms was reduced from 13 to just 11 terms. And now I'll move to how the Incoterms were translated to the Arabic context. We have 3 available Arabic versions of the Incoterms. The first one appeared in 1990, and the second one appeared in the year 2000, and then the third one in 2010. And I am comparing between these versions to show how the translation methods developed across time. So the first version of 1990 exhibited a tendency to provide very detailed paraphrases for the Incoterms, and these paraphrases represent a technique described by Kwame Anthony Appiah as thick translation. And the definition of thick translation is a translation that appropriates the original content by thickening it with textual interventional modes using strategies such as annotations or any other paraphrases that either explain, interpret, or supplement the source elements. And the aim of a thick translation is to locate the text in a rich cultural and linguistic context. That's to guide the reader through the text and leaving the target audience at ease. Examples of how the Incoterms were paraphrased in this year are free carrier, which was paraphrased as delivery of goods with the buyer incurring the carriage fees, and free alongside ship was also paraphrased as delivery of goods on the quay of the export port with the buyer incurring the export costs and risks. So as you see, the translation relied on paraphrasing the duties rather than creating a term. But in the year 2000, the translation technique moved into creating concise technical equivalents for the Incoterms, because they have seemingly already become an integral part of trade exchange over the past 10 years. So in the year 2000, free carrier was translated as carrier delivery. Free alongside ship was rendered as delivery alongside ship, and so on. And as you can visibly see that these terms are more concise and much shorter than the other version of the year 1990. And the recent available version of 2010, it did not bring much changes. It was just a step towards refining the language and the technicality of the Incoterms. So the development was just manifested in maintaining and further enhancing the technicality of the Incoterms. Examples of this development is that in the year 2010, the translation invoked the Arabic technical legal expression duna ta'hud, which in English is rendered as without the obligation. And technical wording is also retained in the rendering of FAS and POP. Also in this year, the Arabic technical term al-no loan, it's an Arabic technical term, was coined to convey the meaning of both costs and freight fees. And that and DAP are also two new concise technical terms that were added in this year as well. So finally, taken together, these three versions, they demonstrate that lexical transformation continues to take place in line with the requirements of the developments in the surrounding context. They show that translation is endowed with capabilities to express the same legal phenomenon differently, demonstrating the correlation between translation and social actions. And such correlation is the mainstay or the core of the theory of translation norms, which is introduced by scholars like Theo Hermans, Andrew Chesterman, and Gideon Toury. The theory of translation norms provides that whether the choice of a particular mode of transfer is practicable in a given situation is largely determined by the situation and by the rules of the game at that moment. And now I will move to the most important part of this research, which is how the Incoterms were conveyed to the everyday discourse. And here I analyzed a sample of 120,000 words approximately from different contexts, such as academic, business, and media. And the analysis sought to explore how the Incoterms are received and used on the real ground, and whether their circulation outside the legal scope was achieved by means of lexical unification or transformation. Did they remain the same as declared by the UN, or they were transformed, modified, simplified? So, my sample comprised two main categories. The first category is original Arabic documents that feature the use of the Incoterms. And the second category is English text along with their Arabic translations. And in linguistics, this methodology is referred to as the analysis of monolingual comparable corpora, which relies on collecting a number of texts originally written in a given language, usually in a specific discipline, as well as a number of texts translated into that language. So my analysis was based on translated material and non-translated or original material. The results were as follows. I encountered 87 instances of unification, 91 instances of modification, and 352 instances of glossing, and I will explain each one in detail. First, unification was reported in 87 instances. In this case, the Incoterms were used exactly as declared by the UN. And here, the Incoterms were reproduced in line with the diction of the UN. In contrast, modifications were reported in 91 instances, mainly for the purpose of simplification. And here we have an example of simplification. It's quoted from a press release by the Central Bank of the UAE on the developments in the balance of payment. Here, the acronym FOB, standing for Free On Board, is transliterated as FOB in Arabic characters, Arabic letters, along with a descriptive substitute that reads, net of the cost of freight and insurance. And this description actually lends itself to a technique described by Christian Nord as an instrumental translation, because it tailored the target language to adhere with the objective of the media, which is delivering smoother information. On the other hand, if we look at how FOB was translated in the context of the UN, we will find that the UN renderings of FOB emulate the pattern of documentary translation also introduced by Christian Nord, because they followed the source content as follows. They were consistent, the UN renderings, they were consistent in indicating that it's a delivery on board, whereas the translation in the press release of the UAE Bank paraphrase the implied meaning, which are debt duties, when it said net of the costs of freight and insurance. So overall, this suggested that legal concepts travel through different vehicles, each being oriented towards fulfilling the expectation of their surrounding context, and in that legal phenomena adapt to what Hans Vermeer calls scopus, to refer to the aim or purpose of a translation, conceiving translation as an action driving a given effect. And here we have the final technique of glossing. And here I had 352 instances of the use of glossing. Generally speaking, glossing as a technique refers to the practice of inserting terms in Latin characters in the text next to their Arabic correspondence or translations. But for the purpose of my analysis, glossing assumed two forms: either inserting the English acronym next to the Arabic translation, or sometimes using the English acronym per se on its own in the second and subsequent mentions. Okay. And the rationale behind the predominant use of glossing, as you see, 350 mentions, could be attributed to the recommendation made by the UN to accept and encourage the implementation of the acronym in translations to other languages. So, linguistically, glossing can be considered an exemplar of what William Frawley calls third code, to describe a translation product that accommodates input from the source language. It's a kind of compromise between the norms or patterns of the source language and those of the target language. However, the use of glossing is likely due to the fact that the UN declared that only the English version of the Incoterms is considered authoritative, so the Arabic version is not an authentic translation. And from a sociological point of view, glossing signifies a means of knowledge homogenization, but at the same time it raises questions about the dominance of English as a lingua franca and the ability of the target language to develop its own technical forms. And from the lens of the knowledge transfer dynamics, it seems that glossing evolves along the lines of the mode of acculturation, and acculturation describes the process of interaction among cultures in the context of unequal exchange, whereby the powerful party tends to forcibly impose its norms and patterns on the less powerful. And my conclusion is that the translation of Incoterms is a perfect example of how neologisms are introduced into another language, because the first attempt of translating the Incoterms in 1990 opted for paraphrasing and interpreting the foreign terms to familiarize the Arabic audience with the newly developed standards of trade practices. And then the subsequent developments, the other years of 2000 to 2010, in these years the translation had a reformist nature, reintroducing and tweaking the Incoterms in a technical, concise diction with the aim to create a technical jargon for the concepts after they have presumably established their ground within the Arabic context. And despite the fact that legalese is infused with several fossilized or long-standing lexical and syntactic aspects like the doublets and triplets and so on, one of the compelling aspects about Incoterms is that they drifted away from the immutable and static legal lexicon by committing to continuous developments in line with the requirements of the surrounding strategic context. And interestingly, the exposure of the Incoterms to diverse contexts, the everyday discourse, revealed that legal terms do not necessarily maintain their technical fixed form. Rather, they could be subject to processes of adjustment and modifications to fit into the new communicative reality. And in this regard, translation facilitates the assimilation of legal concepts across a wide array of contexts, and in turn, enriching the understanding of law within lawmaking context and other related language discourses. And I'm done. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Rana. So we have 10 minutes. I'm actually 12 for a question. You want to stay at the back?
Yeah.
Perfect. Yep.
Thank you. Very interesting presentation, Rania. You talked about acronyms and you talked about the procedures to translate acronyms. You mentioned that acronyms in 1990, full words were used to translate the acronym. Then when it becomes standard, transliteration was used. But we have another, and you mentioned also a glossing as well, in which the English gloss or the English acronym is used with Arabic. What about transliteration of acronyms? That is to say, if we take Brexit. Brexit has been transliterated into Brexit in Arabic and into خروج بريطانيا من الاتحاد الأوروبي. تمام؟ الآن it is standard وبالتالي the acronym is valid. What about in your analysis? Do you find acronyms that are only transliterated?
Well, for the purpose, within the context of the UN, when they first introduced the Incoterms and they translated them into Arabic, they only had the original documents just describing the Incoterms and their translation. They did not use the acronym. But the acronym was used in other contexts of language use. When I analyzed how the Incoterms travel to other language contexts, like how they were used in the media and in academic context, I found that the technique of glossing, which is the use of the English acronym, was very much common. So that explains the media tends to use a smoother language because it caters to a different category of audience as compared to the law-making settings.
There's Hanim and Rafat. Anybody else? Okay.
Thank you, Rana. I just have a question about the corpus. You mentioned the 120,000 words and 700. Just please elaborate a little bit more on how you collect it. Like
Okay.
What you do, search engines and stuff, how you store it.
Yeah.
And I have a comment on documents after.
Sure. Well, for the corpus, I collected it online from online sources, media sources such as Reuters and other newspapers from the UAE and UAE banks as well. And that's for the media. And for business context, that was bank agreements and bank statements and documents from commercial banks. And for academic material, it was just studies on commercial law, dissertations. Some of them were dissertations, some of them were books. That's for the computational analysis was done in an Excel sheet. Yeah.
So the comparative corpus was in an Excel sheet rather than in a software, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Can I say if you're coming from acronyms? Or we can work with acronyms?
No.
I think the idea about acronyms is to do with the difficulty of composing acronyms in Arabic itself.
Yeah.
It's not as easy, as straightforward as it is in Arabic to compose acronyms, as you know. And you gave us a very good example in the United Nations where they discarded the acronyms and they used the full separation of taslim ala nafi sakina, etc. So I think to do the structure is not always easy. And when they are standardized like Brexit, so we know it in the media, we tend to use it a lot, so it's to introduce, so we can use it something like UNICEF or AIDS or etc. So these are easy ones to compose, but it's not always the case. So FOB for me doesn't add any value. I will always get go to the
Yeah,
explanation.
it doesn't, but as the acronym acquires common use, then it started to be known and familiar.
I'm surprised it is used in the corpus,
Yeah,
different context, but it's not used in the UN. That's why it's not standardized in the UN, because they don't really acknowledge women as easy as it in other contexts.
yeah, that's true. When I was working, I always come across the term monorail, which was always transliterated in our Egyptian newspapers. But for the first time, when I looked at this word, I was reading an Arabic newspaper, so I did not expect to find such a term. So when I just saw it, that Arabic, and then I felt no. So I Googled it in English, and I found that it's a train that has just one rail, but it's always used as monorail in a transliterated form in Arabic newspaper. To that, people have started to think of it as kind of an invention, because we did not have a train that has one rail before. So in the literal Arabic translation, it will be a train with one rail. It sounds a bit awkward, tilted, long-winded. Yeah.
More transliteration and more borrowed forms, if you like, to Arabic music.
It implies subservience of the position of the Arabic discourse at some point, but the people working in the media, they don't really take into consideration that kind of cultural hegemony and concepts like these.
Rafat?
Okay, Rana, thank you very much for your fascinating presentation.
Thank you.
You did mention actually that there is some sort of diversity and differences in terms of the translation. And like in the first version, there was a huge descriptive paraphrases, and then in the second, the explanation was probably reduced, etc., etc.
Yes.
So, what is the rationale, in your opinion? What is the rationale behind that? I mean, would that be considered a help to the target reader, or would it be probably, as a burden of creating an obstacle to him? What do you think the target reader needs, considering the translation situation, considering the type of audience, and considering also the purpose of the translation? Why is the first version, probably longer than the second and the third? Yeah.
Okay, thank you for this question. The UN did not really state the reason why this show. Yeah, I know. He's just starting to explain this. They did not state the reason, but in my opinion, I think this very much mimics what Robinson Douglas called the utopian myth of translation. I thought of this development as some sort of the utopian myth. I wanted to use this term, but my supervisor said no, it sounds a little bit weird. So we decided to call it a perfect example, because I thought that when the Incoterms were first introduced to the Arabic context, people had no idea what these concepts stand for. So they had to have some sort of lengthy and full comprehensive explanations of their duties. And then when these terms started to be used within other contexts, within media and business context, so the point is that maybe there was a need to use terms that are more effective, because you cannot, sometimes you have just one slot space, so you cannot really use a long explanation or a long paraphrase that might not be effective on the long run. So maybe the rationale behind that is that they wanted to create concise technical terminology, which is something that we have a critical need for this in the industry of Arabic translation. But the problem is that when we have a neologistic concept and you are trying to create another equivalent for it, you do not have an encyclopedia to explain the term. We are in lack of encyclopedias. So the paraphrase would be the solution in the very first beginning of introducing a new concept, but then afterwards, like later on, you could create a technical term. That's my opinion.
If I may contribute the perspective of a lawyer, this is a way of reintroducing a sort of formalism, right? So you're looking at some social linguistic practices, and you want to make sure that quickly the parties somehow with a formula agree on a certain desired legal effect, right? So much so that, Taslim Matn Safina to me sounds perfect. We agree that that's the formal keyword, the magic word that we say, and we both agree that that's what happens. So Taslim ala Zahra Matn Safina al Bida, it's too long, right? Yeah. So if the purpose, because we're not looking here at changing the legal effects of the agreement, but rather making sure that the parties are agreeing on the same thing in the least possible amount of time. Yeah. So in that sense, I don't see it as necessarily a translational problem, but rather a question of identifying something that would work. So in that sense, I would then suggest or ask you if then the corpus you have chosen is actually fit to test your hypothesis, because you basically want to make sure that, or check if those terms are actually used in commercial practices. Yeah. If they are actually used in agreements. Do we say FOB? Great. So I understand that if I do FOB, I need to pay to whatever it takes to take my goods from my lab onto your train, your ship, whatever, right? So it's like, should you be looking at a different corpus then?
At a different corpus?
Yeah.
Well, the reason for building the corpus was to explore whether they remain the same as declared or dictated by the UN, or they have witnessed changes. And what I found is that they witnessed processes of simplifications sometimes, because in the media, sometimes I found FOB translated as Taslim Zahra Safina in Reuters, but in other sources it was explained as Safi min taklifat al-shahn wal-ta'min. So it depends on which news source, their methodology, and how they want to create their own translation style.
I just imagine like a set of a negotiation, and then you agree on the stuff, you agree on the conditions, you agree on price, and then say FOB.
Yeah.
And that's it, right? So you access the agreement on that. I'm sorry we're beyond time, but join me in thanking Rana for her presentation, and let me call to the lectern Jamil Goui from Qasim Erbah Wargla University. He will speak about legal translation between Arabic and English in Algeria Revisited, requirements for professional practice. You have 20 minutes.
Okay, thank you so much. I would like first of all to start thanking the organizers of this conference that I believe have deployed too much effort to enable us being here today. So thank you so much. Shukran jazilan. So my, let me say, presentation is going to be, as Professor said, it's going to be on revisiting the translation between English and Arabic in Algeria. Speaking about the case of Algeria. Why? Because it's the country that there is to say I know better than others. This is why I say I've narrowed up the research to Algeria because of this reason. We cannot speak about Morocco, Tunisia, because I'm not living there. So to introduce, I would say nobody can deny the significance of legal translation between languages all over the world. And law, indeed, is made, set, and enacted with articles and everything to achieve a better coexistence, cohabitation, and mainly to embody the harmony between people living in the same place or likely in different faraway places, thanks to the intervention of translation most of the time. So in Algeria, for instance, and I would say for instance because I might generalize the results at the very end or limit them only to Algeria if you see this case is not happening elsewhere. So in Algeria, made is law and written essentially in Arabic, and then translated most of the time into French. So the source language is Arabic, and the target language mainly most of the time is French, and rarely the source language is French and then translated into Arabic. And Algeria, as you might have, and as you might know, is a North African Arab country that was colonized by France for 132 years. It means from 1830 to 1962. This is, I might say, a very long period under the French colonialism. Algeria accordingly acknowledged the use of Arabic being its native language since centuries, along with the use of French being a second language well circulating all around because of the French colonialism. I would say, and I would highlight here, the French existence in Algeria much more than any other language, apart from Arabic, of course. The second language is French, and most of the other languages, following the example of English, German, or any other language, is a foreign one par excellence. And they would say a foreign one par excellence due to the influence mainly of French. And I would here confirm that many people have a native competency in French in Algeria, mainly old ones who lived during the French reign, along with many others of young generation too. Therefore, English, along with other languages in Algeria, are foreign languages. This is to be confirmed. So if I move to speak about legal translation practice in Algeria, I would say we don't have the position of legal translator, but we have tasks in connection with legal translation. We have the position called translator, another position called interpreter, but legal translator is not there on the list of positions in Algeria. I don't know whether it's the case worldwide or not, but legal translation is practiced by the following. First is practiced by official translators, and we call them, technically speaking, we call them official sworn translators, interpreters. And who are these official sworn and translators, interpreters? Are those accredited by the Ministry of Justice after undergoing tests and after passing them, being interviewed orally and in writing. Generally they give them, let me call it an accreditation, and they become accordingly official sworn translators, interpreters, having their offices, working as freelancers, but under the supervision of the Ministry of Justice and some courts with courts of appeal. The second one who might be, let me call appeal to translate legally and might be legal translators by position are those working for multinational or international companies, mainly in the south of Algeria. In the south of Algeria, we have many partnerships. I mean, in oil companies, we have, for instance, the Algerian company Sonatrach, along with the British company, for instance, BP. So they form a joint venture, Sonatrach BP. At that moment, they would hire some translators. They give them the position of a translator, but they translate legally. It means they translate contracts, treaties, conventions, and things in connection with the measures and the, let me call contracting and procurement in connection with the work in the oil field. So I might say that we do have only 2 persons entitled to work legally or to translate legally in Algeria. And for the academic training, this is professionally speaking, for the academic training, indeed we don't at all provide a degree in illegal translation in Algeria. If you check all the universities, we don't have this program of legal translation. But we might have it as a module in the curriculum of translation, just one module and not a whole course or a whole program. The second thing, that no specialists. We don't have specialists at all in legal English or legal translation. Both of them. We're lacking specialists in both legal translation and legal English too. So it may influence the training on legal translation. Most of specialists are specialists whether in ESP, mainly ESP, that means glossary. They are specialized in ESP, English for specific purposes, and most of them, they are monolingual. It means they might master English only, or Arabic only, or French only, without mastering second language that enables them to intervene to translate. The other thing is we don't have legal drafting training at all in Algeria. Following the example of the UK, you have many trainings in legal drafting, contracting, and everything, but in Algeria it's not at all the case. Maybe in French, yes. In French language, yes. In Arabic language, yes. But English, no. This is why I should be speaking about the legal difficulties or difficulties of translating into English or from English in Algeria. The first, let me say, difficulties might be very general, and I might generalize them to many other countries, I think, around the globe, or at least in the Arab world. Problems or difficulties in connection with terminology. And if I speak about terminology, I would start speaking about terms in connection with the Islamic Sharia mainly, and they would illustrate here, I might say the word idda, and they wonder how to translate the word idda into English, how to translate it. So this concept is not in the English culture, neither in the French culture too. So it's a major difficulty. So if it's translated into English or even French, we may start investigating the dimension, the charge, the load, the meaning, and likely the reception by the others, how they receive it, how they understand it, if it's not a word for them. Or shall we have recourse to description? We just describe it and leave it. And something might be happening when we translate the word isma, that is in connection to with the Islamic Sharia. So isma, same thing. We might fail to find the right word translating it. So we might lose a load of time looking for how to translate and convey this meaning with its charges. And at the end, we might say the fact that we have failed to find the word and we have recourse to explaining or paraphrasing or something else. Same thing for the word zakat, which is different from the word alms. They have translated it at several occasions to alms, but alms is, let's say, have its own charge, which is a bit different, if not quite different from the word zakat in the Islamic Sharia. And they see them recently transliterating the word zakat into zakat, leaving it as it is. And I don't really know whether it's correct or not. And this might be a subject to debate between us if you'd like. So this is first. I mean, if you speak about the lexical gap difficulty, these are some examples among others. And the other difficulty that we are facing is expressive. That is to say, let's say, in connection with expressions, in connection maybe with structures, before speaking about stylistic difficulties. So in expressions, we have many expressions that I've noticed myself, even official translators might fail to render correctly into English. Like I would give some examples here from Arabic into English. I would say مثلا يستعملون سلمت هذه الشهادة في نهاية كل شهادة. سلمت هذه الشهادة أو الإفادة أحيانا لتستعمل في حدود ما يخوله القانون أو في حدود ما يسمح به القانون. Indeed, this is inspired from the French system. Cette attestation ou ce certificat est délivré pour servir et valoir ce coup de droit. It's inspired a bit from the French system. It's like, I would say, a calque to the Algerian, Arabic. So they use سلمت هذه الشهادة لتستعمل في حدود ما يسمح به القانون. And even official translators sometimes might fail, let's say, to render it. And I've seen them translating this certificate is established to be used within law limits, which you might notice it's a little bit of frugal English, poor English here. This is here. I might highlight I might say I'm smelling French in the middle. I'm smelling French in the middle because French says cette attestation est établie, so they translate literally established, while in English it might be meaningless. Established. So this certificate, it might be issued. This certificate might be delivered, but not established. So this certificate is issued to serve in accordance with law provision. Though it's not in the English system, but when you try to translate it into English, you have to deploy some effort to start smelling English instead of smelling French in the middle. I might say, in another example, يحق للمستفيد أن يحصل على تعويض مثلا يعني. And they've noticed many official translators might render it into English by the following. So the beneficiary keeps the right, and I would say keeps the right to, and you just carry on. And at several occasions I started wondering why they use keeps the right. Then I would understand that French is in the middle. The influence of the French is in the middle. So le bénéficiaire se réserve le droit. You say French here, French signs are in the English. While they were supposed, these official translators or others, supposed to use the beneficiary is entitled to, this smells much more English than French. Here, let me say I'm speaking a little bit about the interference of French in the middle, while like a transitional language, while rendering into English, which might influence tremendously the quality of translation you're providing. I've noticed as well the use of إثباتا لهذا. نستعمل أيضا إثباتا لهذا حررت الوثيقة الفلانية. يقال بالفرنسية on fait de quoi cette attestation a été établie. Donc في الإنجليزية لاحظت أنه تترجم إلى in confirmation then they carry on, which is not correct. And these translators were supposed to use instead in witness whereof, which is commonly used in English, instead of putting French in the middle and producing an English that smells French. Same thing, I will not, because I have many, let's say plenty of examples here. I've noticed the misuse of hereby too. And what else? Okay. Which might be a little bit misleading and would result in a bad quality of translation that is full with the French signs or a middle language all the time in place. Here, a very, let me say, significant or relevant question might rise. Are we supposed to teach translators, mainly in Algeria, legal courses or legal translation courses? Aren't we through this limiting their scope of work and employability? That is to say, if we train somebody to be a legal translator, in his job later on, aren't we limiting his scope of work? And if we give a chance to, let's say, a lawyer to draft instead of translator, would it be really working? Or shall we have what we name collaborative translation? That is to say, we give to a translator to render the meaning, then we give it later on to a person who is specialized in law to review. These are all questions that I might be raising through this one. Thanks so much. This is it. Yeah.
Thank you, Jamil. So we actually have more time for Q&A since you were briefer. So Rafat has a question, and then Mariam.
Right. Well, thank you, Professor Jamal, for this thought-provoking presentation. Well, I have a comment and a question. The comment is regarding the terminology that you've actually exemplified. In my opinion, I don't think that, or it will be rare to find a legal term related to a particular legal system which has got an equivalent term in another legal system. And when I say equivalent term, means a term, which means only one word. This is rare, if not impossible, actually. Why? Because you know that legal systems differ in terms, because you know they are derived from different legal cultures, and these legal terms, which are a product of these legal systems, designate different legal concepts. And the likelihood is that a particular legal concept in a particular legal system is not present in another legal system because law has no universal reference, etc., etc. So the likelihood is that legal translators, when dealing with legal terminologies, they have really to open their drawers and find different techniques that they need actually to adopt in order to render the legal terms correctly. But I think it's a kind of the dream to find an equivalent legal term in the different target legal system. The other point, the other thing which you've been actually asking regarding whether the translator needs to be trained in legal text. With all respect to all different text types in translation. I don't say this because I'm actually specialized in legal translation, but I'm sure most of you would agree with me, if not all. Legal translation is considered, if not the most difficult type of translation, then one of the most difficult type of the translation. I don't think that there is a doubt about it. So, yeah, although I do support the notion that translators should be trained in all different types of the text, but specialty also is important. So they may want to specialize in a particular type of text, but it doesn't mean that they can't translate other types. They should be really trained, in as many types of text as possible. But when it comes to legal translation, because it is sensitive and sacred, and a mistake might cause a war between two states. If correct me if I'm wrong, but if we're dealing with a text which is for application and implementation, that is going to be very, very sensitive. So I think the training in legal translation is of paramount importance. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for this. I was wondering whether the problem you mentioned were, in fact, have little to do with translation as such, and are more a question overall of training. And if the translators, who translate into English have the required English language competence, the linguistic interference shouldn't occur to this extent. So it's the language competence of the people who translate, and it's also their approach to translation, presumably. But wider issue with regard to assessing translations when we think we are doing translation assessment, and in fact we are assessing language deficiency. And so, I wonder whether this is the case in this case. Can I just respond to the comment about the hierarchy of difficulties?
Please.
I'm not sure. I mean, I was thinking about scientific and technical translation, and I think the implications are huge as well. I mean, you could have loss of life if your technical translation is faulty. So I think this specialism aspect is very, very important. I'm not sure it is, solely a matter for legal translation. But that's, I'm outside the legal domain, so thank you.
No, thank you. Hanem?
On the point of training, thank you very much for all. On the point of training, you mentioned there is no legal English, there is no legal drafting training in English, but there is one in Arabic. I was interested to learn a bit more about the training available for legal drafting in Arabic.
Would you like to respond?
Otherwise, we get all the questions that.
I don't. Oh yeah, we have Sakia.
For the legal translator in back home, my country, legal translator refers to a sworn translator who's granted as a license, who can translate legal texts, technical texts, and other documents. It's like for the petition. For the word "redda," I think this comes under the lexical void, like other similar terms. And people give, I think, options to solve this problem, like for ta'nid in Christianity, for example. They invent terms or some other solutions.
Thomas?
I heard you mention that you had some examples of hereby being used wrong. I'm curious if you have time to talk quickly about some of those examples.
He said hereby?
Hereby.
Oh, okay.
I think.
Yeah.
You can go ahead and respond.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for the questions you've raised. They would help me tremendously improving, of course, the paper at a later stage. I would say at the very beginning, the question raised by Professor Al-Wazna in connection with the terminology. Though it's, let's say, a common problem or a difficulty, but it's time-consuming. It might be considered a very major difficulty encountering translators all the time. So we should acknowledge that it's a difficulty that is taking the energy of the translator. But all the feedback you've given was, of course, very significant. Responding to Professor Miriam, you're speaking about the language mastery and everything. But there is all the time, when you're specialized in French, English, Arabic, there is all the time a language of preference and the language that is dominated, let's say, the scene much than the other one. So I think we do have the optimal and ideal competencies. So if you're better at translating between French and Arabic, you might be, and I may say, you might be interfering French from time to time. This is the influence of the language that is dominating in your mind. This is much more than the language mastery. And the second point is that when we evaluate students' language mastery, generally the test is general. Does not go deeper into legal English or legal French, or the test is general. So if the student or the candidate masters English, he speaks with a fluency, then he's accepted. But when we go to the details, we discover several things. We discover several things that we did not expect at the very beginning. And sometimes even some students are very good at class, then when you see their performance on the day of the exam, you get astonished. So these are all results that we might expect. Responding to Professor Al-Farhati, you've said legal Arabic drafting. Yeah, some schools in Algeria, especially in the capital city, Algiers, they provide some legal drafting, mainly contracts in... say it again? Not schools of law, but teachers of law teach, or they are contracted, with those schools, and they teach the, let me call them candidates or students, how to draft in legal drafting in Arabic or in French, but not in English, I would say again. Of course, I would acknowledge to call it, you said lexical void, and I've called it in my presentation lexical gap, so we share the same ID. Yeah, this is it, yeah. For Thomas, the use of hereby, I might say, many translators see this is a word that is purely in connection with legal drafting, so they don't know even how to place it. It's about the placement of this word hereby. Sometimes they place it in a place which is irrelevant. They place it at the very end or at the very beginning, instead of saying, I hereby certify that. They use it at the very beginning, for instance. They say, hereby, I, and you see, so it's all about the placement and the place where hereby is put. That's what I've meant by the misuse of hereby, along with other, lexis. This is it.
All right, so join me in thanking Jamil.
Okay, thank you so much.
Our next speaker is Widad Sekhri from the Frère Mentoure University in Constantinople. She will be speaking about... Constantina, okay. The importance of legal translation among first-year master students, process and strategies, a key to enhancing students' ability of translating legal terms in the Arabic context. Do you have a PowerPoint? Okay, perfect. You have 20 minutes.
Yes, okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizing staff, especially Professor Parolin and Dr. Hawker. So I heartily express my words of thanks and gratitude. My contribution, let's say the title of my talk is centered on the importance of legal translation among first-year master students, process and strategies. So here I'm going to take you a bit far from, let's say, the work of a translator as a criticizer, okay? So I'm going to deal with it from a pedagogical point of view and from a critical point of view. Okay, so the outline is as follows. We are going to deal with the statement of the problem, the aim of the study, some theoretical foundations such as definition of legal, definition of translation and law, and then definition of legal translation and the nature of legal translation, the characteristics, then the methodology, the results, and the conclusion, and some recommendations. So as a start, I may say that legal translation is a combination of both translation and law. I'm the one who was it. Okay, thank you. So I said that it's a combination between translation and law. We may say that translating legal terms from English into Arabic is very difficult for proof translators, as most of you highlighted through this conference, let alone, let's say, novice translators. The legal register is a whole system that is derived from countries' constitutions. Legal language is a language related to specific legal system. So, as said by Harvey, combining in 2002, combining the inventiveness of literary translation
with the terminological precision of technical translation is going to be the best source to translate legal texts, okay? So, as a statement of the problem, we may say that there are different legal systems used by different countries in the world, and this makes the source of the problem of confusion among first-year master's students when they translate legal texts. For that, most of them seek ready-made equivalents by just checking the dictionaries, okay? And let's say without paying attention to the context, which most of the time results in prosaic, let's say, legal texts that are far in meaning from the original ones. So the objectives, let's say the aim behind this study, is to cast light on the translation subject matter in the Department of Arts and English at the University of Kharmantouri Constantine I, and to investigate the translation process among first-year master students. I highlight here the option or specialty of linguistics and applied language studies, because there are two others which are didactics and American and British civilization. So when they are given legal text, where the translation so becomes special and specialized. The research questions we have highlighted are as follows. Why cannot students of first year, I may say, why cannot students of first year master degree translate legal texts appropriately? And this may be, this may seem as a judgment. You may ask me a question about this later on, okay? The second question, what is the best solution to overcome such a problem, okay? So in order to try to answer these two questions, we hypothesize that if first-year master students of English, linguistics and applied language studies know about the contextual meaning of legal terms and use appropriate strategies, they will be able to provide the right Arabic equivalents. So I return to the theoretical foundations and I speak about legal translation. So legal translation is one of the specialist or technical types of translation. It is a translational activity that is related to law and legal process. It involves the language of law. As a nature, or when we speak about the nature of legal language, we may say that it has four main features. These are as follows. So there is the normative nature, there is the performative nature, there is the technical nature, and there is the indeterminate nature. And lawyers know this perfectly. As characteristics of legal language, so I'm going to look at the characteristics of legal language from vocabulary, syntax, pragmatics, and style. Concerning vocabulary, there is most of the time the use of Old and Middle English, the use of Latin words, the use of Old French and Anglo-Norman words, the use of terms of art, and the deliberate use of words and expressions with flexible meaning. This is according to Malenkov in 1963. Concerning syntax, the characteristics of legal sentence structure are the formal and impersonal written style pairs, the extensive use of conditions, quantifiers, models, and so on, Legal sentences include subordinate devices, repetition of lexemes, and the rare use of anaphora. So, from a pragmatic point of view, legal utterances perform acts, and speech act is a prominent linguistic feature, is the frequent use of performative markers. And sometimes we notice ambiguity, vagueness, and clarity, and so on. Concerning style, legal style is tied to culture and results from legal traditions. There is a strong tendency of certain manners as wordiness and clarity, pomposity and dullness in the language of law. So this is concerning the translation of legal text or legal translation. Now I move to the strategies, or let's say the model that I have followed. The focus was on 4 strategies, which are the functional equivalence, formal equivalence, borrowing, and description. In functional equivalence, the focus is on target let's say, functional equivalence is a target terms. It's a target language-oriented strategy. Formal equivalence and borrowing are source language strategies because they focus on the meaning of the source text. And we have description, which is a neutralized or a neutral type of strategy. So when speaking about the research methodology, I may say that the population is first-year master's students of English, linguistics and applied language studies. The whole promotion, the 3 specialities, is composed of 7 groups, and we have taken only 1 group, which is the one of applied language studies. We have 3 groups in applied language studies. We have 3 groups in didactics and 1 group in civilization. The research instruments or tools were observation and a test. The test is a decree composed of a number of articles, and the intention is to know if students have learned how to translate legal terms after they dealt with 2 texts previously. These texts were, one was entitled Legal Marriage Contract, and the other was from Arabic into English, and it was entitled Wakala. Okay, where most of them translated it into procuration. Okay, procuration instead of power of attorney. These 2 are possible. Okay, so results. Students tend to use formal translation and sometimes description as the commonest general strategies used in the translation of legal terms. Functional equivalence was sometimes employed by students and neglected some other times. Students sometimes find the legal equivalent as it functions in the target language, and they fail some other times. Students also failed in finding the equivalence of some legal expressions and terms, let's say the ones which are authentic. Okay. In a nutshell, first-year master's students have succeeded in using some strategies such as functional equivalence, formal equivalence, and description. They haven't used borrowing at all. Students failed in translating because they do not know the contextual meaning and the use of legal terms. Students' translation is limited to the linguistic context. It does not exceed it to the functional context of the target language. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Widad.
Thank you.
Do we have questions? questions? Hanny? Hanny.
Thank you so much for that. I just have two questions. The first one is to do with how big is the group, and you said one group of
1 out of 7.
3.
Of 3 from the specialty and of 7.
And the second question is about, am I right to assume that you have been trained first before you have?
It's not a matter of training. It's in the curriculum. Okay.
So I assume that you told them for.
Yes, I taught.
The whole year, possibly.
No. Let's say that in the master degree, we don't have enough time to teach them legal translation for a whole year or a given semester. Okay, it is just an initiation to translating. Okay, so we just give them different texts from different registers. Okay, they are not specialized in translation.
So at what point in the course of that then did you do this study? Is it at the end of it or in the middle of it?
I said that, just a moment. I said that I gave them 2 texts to translate before, okay? And I told them some terms, how to translate some terms, okay? Then I have given them this test. Is it okay? Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yes?
Was there some?
Yeah, I think you mentioned about 4 different methods: the functional, borrowing, description,
Yes.
and this is the last. Is formal, yeah.
Formal, yes.
Yeah, formal and borrowing are source language oriented, and function is target language oriented, and the description is neutral, as you said. So, I mean, if the student used one of those, or probably double it or couple it, did the student give any justification why he used this and he didn't use that? Or do you ask students to justify their choice of strategy?
So I may say that they use these strategies unconsciously. This is just a matter of analysis. I am the one who named that they use this, and then they use this.
Yeah, but
they are unconscious.
Yeah, but you didn't ask them, for example, if they use borrowing. Did you ask them, why did you use transliteration here? Why did you use functional equivalence here? So did you give the student a chance to justify the choice of strategy?
No.
Can I ask you? I mean, because probably this paper and this discussion is very clear to those who teach translation, a bit less clear for someone like me who is not trained in translation. So, can you give us something that could help us, appreciate, from some examples?
There are examples in the presentation, but they were not okay. So some of the examples.
So what is something that you liked, something that you wanted to do, something that they expected them to do?
Okay.
As you look for it, like a personal recollection that I had to teach the constitutional law class in Cairo University to first years, and it was supposed to be in English, but I had often to actually do the Arabic, and we actually used the translation. That was in the law school, and it was like just a constitutional law subject. I actually used translation precisely to check that they got what they were reading. So it can actually be a very useful instrument for the pedagogy of law, not necessarily for the pedagogy of legal translation. So
So,
So I'm very sympathetic to the to the matter.
Okay. As an example, we have the title of let's say, the decree that was given to the students, which is Sharia Court Procedures Regulations. There were many equivalents. Some of them, let's say 5, translated it into إجراءات المحاكم. Okay, courts procedures. I focused on this part because here where students have given me different equivalents. So courts procedures was translated into إجراءات المحاكم, نظام إجراءات المرافعات, نظام المرافعات, نظام المحاكم, نظام إجراءات المحاكم, نظام إجراءات المحاكمات.
Mm-hmm.
So, and these are different translations of the same, let's say, expression. Okay, but the best one is نظام المرافعات الشرعية.
Oh, I see. I was about to say, nobody has translated Sharia here.
Okay. This is the first example. And then we have dated, which seems a generic term or a general term, but it was translated into بتاريخ, في تاريخ, لتاريخ, تاريخ المؤرخ فيه. What do you think of these translations?
The translation of?
Dated.
Oh, dated.
المؤرخ. المؤرخ فيه. Yes.
It depends. that's why we're here discussing it. حسب. All right. Do we have any other questions? Yes, we have Mohammed. Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't see Jamil. He writes.
Very much related to Dr. Rafat's, comment about, translation strategies. You mentioned, 4 translation strategies.
Mm-hmm.
And you think that, borrowing is a translation strategy, and descriptive, or I would say description, or descriptive translation as a, I think, is borrowing a strategy or a translation procedure? Simply because there is I quote, Vinay and Vinay,
the 7 procedures.
They classify translation strategies into direct and indirect or oblique translation strategies, and included under the, the 2 translation strategies, 7 procedures, one of which is, borrowing. So, is it a strategy or a procedure?
Normally it is a procedure because it deals with smaller items in a text, okay? But the strategy encloses the procedures, okay? It is the covering term, okay?
So I seize the opportunity to excuse my previous presentation of Jamal as Jamil. And so Jamal has been a victim of the French romanization of Jamal. I know, min al-Jamal, but yes, so sorry.
Just like you said that your population is measured in applied linguistics. Don't you think it's a little bit strong for them to ask them to translate legally? Because legal translation is difficult even for those measured in translation. So what if you give the text to those who are not measured in translation? I think it's very strong for them.
So let me say that they studied translation for 2 previous years. They studied it in 2nd year and in 3rd year. In 1st year master degree, we teach them, let's say the lecture of translation is divided into the theoretical part and the practical part. In the practical part, we just initiate them to legal translation, okay? And let me say that these are not really authentic texts, okay? They are a bit simpler than the ones that are really authentic, okay? Thank you.
There's a question.
I would like to add to the second last comment, and I would also assume that it would be even more difficult for students who don't have a background not only law but let's say like Qawaniyan Sharia to translate to English, because that in itself needs somebody who has a background in fiqh almost to be able to choose a precise word. And then my other question would be, have you tried having them translate content, for the Sharia court, were they able to translate specific legal content or procedure, مثلا in family law?
Could you please repeat?
Have you presented them with specific content from Murafa, the court Sharia, to translate in English?
I said that this is a text that was taken from the internet, and it is related to Saudi Arabia, because we don't have texts that that are written in English, in legal translation. I mean, in Algeria, okay. That's why I tried to let them translate this text from English into Arabic. It is composed of a number of articles, and I have just given them the first part. This is a trial, you may say. Maybe it is really difficult for students, but this is we know that research is always a trial of something. Okay? Thank you.
Can I be the advocate of the student? So, I mean, requiring them to know that they need to translate law as nizam requires them to have a knowledge of the legal system of Saudi Arabia, period, because no other legal system uses nizam as law. So unless you provided them with that information, and so then you have already given them that information that you're just testing, otherwise it's a sort of, I don't know what you're testing then. Are you testing if they're familiar with the legal system of Saudi Arabia, or are you testing if they're good legal translators?
I'm trying to expose them to legal translation for the first time. Just to, I said that this is an initiation.
Right, but next time, for instance, they operate in Algeria, right? And let's imagine that they come across, they need to translate law, right? Statute. Imagine if they translate it as nizam, which is the Saudi word for it. Would you be happy with that?
No.
Okay.
Of course not.
So I think the point here is easier to test it on your national system per se, rather than resulting to general.
So this is the first step. Maybe in the future I'm going to test them according to the Algerian constitutions or the
خليه مرسوم. But I suspect that the test was not with the internet accessible, is it?
No.
Yeah, no. Exactly. When you're tested, you don't have the internet access.
Just one word about Saudi.
Hold on, we have one. Mohammed?
Well, thank you. I suppose that, the text is translation from English to Arabic, yes?
Yes.
So the question of authenticity and accuracy of the outcome translated language. So where do you put yourself when you're assessing your student? Would you like them to have more authentic Arabic text or more accurate translation? And considering just the last part about
could you please repeat these two?
Yeah. So the authenticity of the translation or the accuracy, the technicality of it. So what do you assess between these two variables? And just I want to go back to the internet issue actually. It's not easily, for Arabic, if you are looking for an equivalent of an English term or vice versa, internet sometimes is more misleading than helpful. Because you would have 22 countries and every one of them they have their own procedures and their own terminology, and that really is not helpful sometimes.
Rafat wanted to say something else, and then I think we need to.
In Saudi, actually, it's a bit confusing here, because if we're talking about nizam al-hukum, yes, we do use nizam here as you know, the word qanun, we do use nizam al-hukum, but when it comes to you know, al-sharia al-islamiyya, we wouldn't use nizam, or you know, nor would we use even qanun, we would use al-sharia al-islamiyya. So we would use al-sharia al-islamiyya for the provisions taken from Al-Quran and Sunnah.
No, but I never spoke about Sharia. I said that since the translation was the translation of statute, Saudi Arabia is the only place in which you use the word nizam to refer to a statute. That was the only thing that I.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I think we have an involuntary question here in the back.
It's more a point, because I'm not an academic at all, I'm a translator, so purely coming from that point of view, and it's quite interesting to hear actually what you were saying about the internet, because I am a legal translator, and we don't have sworn translators in Britain, and you are having to be like an expert in all the different Arabic countries and in the different kinds of law, because what we keep talking about is a legal translator. If you're a French to English legal translator, you tend to specialise in it might be in sort of civil law, you might be in criminal, you might be in something different, whereas as an Arabic to English translator, you tend to specialise in all of it. And it's just very interesting to hear all the different things here. It's something that's needed, I think, generally, is to find a way of taking all of this and providing it for actual, practical, when you're in a situation that if you're translating a country's laws, you don't necessarily have a lot of time, realistically, or if you're given a contract, you might be given 2 days to do it in. You're not thinking about all the intricacies of it. So it was really a point rather than a question.
I think you have the sympathy of a lot of people in the room, because those of us who are expected to be experts on a geographical area that goes from one ocean to the other, north to south, on across centuries, on all domains of laws. Whereas in other subject areas, you can be the specialist of inheritance law in 16th century, you know, this little duchy in Italy, right? That's fine. Whereas we are expected to know everything. So you have all my sympathy, and I suspect that this is sympathy of many other people in the room. But anyway, thank you very much for sharing.
May I add one point?
Yes, one. One.
The system in teaching translation for undergraduate students who study English language. I mean, I'm familiar with this system, where the students study first year general, and then they have the 3 years second year general translation as a subject among other subjects. So they study general translation and then move to some specialized translation, legal, journalistic, and so on. But with legal translation, we do not ask them to translate legal text as such, but we train them in how they use the available resources. Because with technical translation, you would have manuals, dictionaries, glossaries, and so how to guide them to use the proper, best resources. Thank you.
I think this is a comment for, consideration, right? General consideration. Yeah. Otherwise, you will deduct it from your time. So please join me in thanking Widad. And I'll invite Zakia Deeb from the Libyan Academy, who is our last presenter, on legal translation in a political context, the difficulty of choosing between alternatives in translating electoral law terms. And here I seize the opportunity to apologize for, in the booklet, you have seen that the Arabic is all over the place. No matter how many times we revised it, the only printer that could actually staple it in the center was in a floor that possibly had some Mac thing, and so the Arabic is entirely out of whack. This is particularly evident in the abstract of Zakiya. So, but I apologize also to the others who had the Arabic in their abstract.
You can read it from left to right.
Yeah, you need to take a word and then consider it's the second. But anyway.
And also she, not he.
Yeah.
In the booklet.
Yeah. That's not. Yeah.
Okay.
That's taken care of. You have 20 minutes. Thank you, Zakiya.
Thank you very much. Well, I know you must be very tired, or at least tired, but I hope you are not bored. The good news, anyway, that I cut my presentation short. But anyway, will you change this, please?
Is this yours?
Yeah, I think this is the one. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
You touch the...
Okay. Well, one thing, don't be horrified by the items included in the table of contents. I will skip some because I cut it short. So, the background of this research came from experience in 2012 general election in Libya to elect the General National Congress. It was the first experience of electing a Congress as such after 42 years or so. A collective effort was made by many bodies, but I mention the UN, the UNDP, a judiciary committee, the High Commission for the election. Okay. Well, two things. The background, the data I collected, the experience. The data collected is from my experience working with these three bodies. Originally, I was recruited by IFES. The IFES is a company for dispute resolution. Dispute resolution in elections. Its work should have been after the election, but actually it was involved from the start in setting the scene for the election. It cooperated with the UNDP and the High Commission for the election. The other source of data is the Arabic lexicon for electoral terms, compiled by a team from the UNDP after some work on elections in the Arab world. It's on the data collected from 8 Arab countries, including Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, Iraq, Palestine, Jordan, Egypt, I think. Interestingly, inside the glossary or the lexicon dictionary, Libya was not mentioned as a different, when they use different terms with regard to certain electoral terms. But anyway, no problem. Philippe Banyeve has worked as a consultant for the UN, helping to organize what were often the first democratic election in the Arab world, in the Arab countries, undergoing political transition. This is from the internet, from the YouTube actually. The interview is on this website. Interesting. What she said about how people struggled with even the most basic terms. And this is what I experienced myself with the team. Some of the members of the team were my students at the Academy of Postgraduate Studies who graduated from the Academy, granted an MA degree in translation. Okay, some quotations here. One of them is Basil Hatim's reference to choosing between alternatives. What he says is that if we don't have alternatives, if we don't deal with alternatives in translation, that's not translation. Which means it will be like a restaurant menu, word to word. Rice, arroz. Soup, sharba. And that's, I think he's referring to strategies. Translation is meant to involve strategies. I'm going to skip this one and the next one because they are irrelevant after I had my presentation reduced. The contrast. I cannot read it from here. I don't know. Maybe make it bigger. Make it bigger.
I cannot make it bigger.
Oh, no, never mind.
You're back to theoretical break.
Legal translation tends to involve more culture-specific than universal components. This is true from some examples I'm going to give later. Okay. Definition of the terms. Well, the word election itself might be problematic. If we say in Arabic, election is intikhabat, but also you find it in dictionaries, manuals as iqtira', tasweet, and so on. But the most common is intikhabat. We also have some reference here. When you translate it back to English, you find voting, ballot, polling, vote, poll, and so on. Anyway, the word alternative means choice or option. It's good that we have options, alternatives. But too many alternatives, too many options might be confusing. Okay, anyway, I can't see it very well here, but among the types of choices and alternatives given in dictionaries, in websites, in glossaries, include slash, comma, or, and. And this is confusing, particularly for training. Some of you talked about training for students, for novice translators, what to choose if you give me so many alternatives. One example here, the use of slash. So we have examples. If we look at, for example, approval voting, تصويت متعدد، تصويت القبول، الاستحسان، الموافقة, approval voting. So which one would I choose? And which one would the translator, particularly novice translator, who worked with the Commission, with the UNDP, choose? The other example is the comma. Okay, we have some examples here Okay, for applicable, it's a general term, but with electoral discourse, it's قابل للتطبيق المطبق المعمول به. If we take the word count, which is common in elections, so count يعد الأصوات يفرز الأصوات. I think يعد الأصوات is different to فرز الأصوات. العد غير الفرز. I think. Well, if we take notification, for example, إبلاغ, إشعار, إنذار. So, which one would you choose? I put this in red, which is interesting. Valid vote. اقتراع صحيح صالح صوت ملزم. صوت ملزم would how people would understand it. What does it mean? While valid vote in English is very clear. Okay, well, a common word like veto is حق الاعتراض أو حق الرفض. Probably here we would go for the more established expressions, like what Rifat said yesterday about collocations. الرفق بالحيوان is more an established expression than the رعاية الحيوان. So for veto here probably حق الرفض maybe. Okay, the other alternative way of giving alternatives is the use of أو. Okay, we have عد أو فرز الأصوات. Again, عد and فرز are not the same. You probably help me in this. Counting officer, مشرف أو موظف, عد أو فرز الأصوات. Isn't this a bit complicated? So repetition, alternatives or options with regard to both the officer and the counting. مشرف أو موظف, عد أو فرز الأصوات. If we go to a simple word like omission, in general omission is just skip, but here omission التغاضي عن أو عدم ذكر أو الانتباه للشيء. So these are given, well, I mean, I've got these from different resources actually, and I have them in my reference list. So just omission التغاضي عن أو عدم أو ذكر أو الانتباه للشيء. Isn't it easier in English? The word poster here, I will probably mention it later as well when we have more words for one word. ملصق إعلاني أو دعائي. Witness and offense. حضور ومعاين. ارتكاب مخالفة أو جريمة. So, some of them they go verbals actually. Plus one is and, which is wa. Not as frequent as the others. التعارض والتناقض, we have for discrepancy. Periodic review, مراجعة وتدقيق بشكل دوري. Like paraphrasing. Okay, well, if we go to the one in red, production of a voters list. إعداد وإنتاج, very little. قوائم الناخبين, production of a voter list. إنتاج here, I don't know. Maybe إصدار, maybe some other alternative. Okay, we have also problems with dictionaries with regard to to these four. We have more, but I'm going to just focus on these 4 items here. And we talked about acronyms, and the problem with acronyms is that Arabic does not accommodate acronyms because we don't have the capital letters. This is maybe one issue. There are some attempts to accommodate the system of acronyms in Arabic, like البنك السعودي الخارجي, something like that. Saudi, Sin, Ba, something. In Libya we have شركة ليبية مساهمة, Shin, Lam, Mim. No, we know these things, but otherwise many did not succeed in importing the system of acronyms into Arabic. The good thing about the electoral terminology and United Nations terminology is that they have manuals and supplementary material that explains. Okay, just to take them one by one. If we look to the examples here, Central Election Committee, CEC, Chairman, المسؤول التنفيذي للجنة الانتخابية المركزية. I think we have to just paraphrase it because it will not be understood. CEC. It's not like other acronyms like WHO or UNESCO or well-known acronyms. هيئة إدارة الانتخابات for EME, جهاز التسجيل الآلي المباشر. The word مباشر here doesn't sound right actually. Direct recording election equipment. This is interesting. GOTV, get out the vote. امنح صوتك تشجيع التصويت. I'll go quickly for the standardization issue. This is, we talked about this a lot, but with the glossary, the Arabic lexicon of electoral terminology of 481 entry, I did not calculate it in word count or entry count, but it looks as if more than half of the terms we have in the Arab different translation in the Arab countries. Sometimes you find only Jordan, Tunis, and Iraq. Sometimes one country, but I've chosen this particular one because almost most of them. I put Libya here because it is different but not included. I don't know whether it dropped this as usual. For the election management body as an electoral commission, they explain actually what this means, and then they give the term in Arabic, in French and Arabic. So you see quite many of these examples in the glossary. Cultural. This is interesting. The cultural issue is that, like, I'm not focusing here. What is the example here? Door-to-door campaigning, which is, those who are familiar with the campaigning, the election campaigning in the UK, you will see people go and knock on doors and to convince them to vote for a particular one. But if they do that in Libya, that's a reason not to elect the person. Yeah, don't come and knock on my door asking me to vote for you. No, I'm not going to do it. Yeah. What we do...
No, that's the Egyptian version.
Is it?
Cartoony.
It's the same. I was a bit surprised that it does exist in Iran, Palestine, and Lebanon. But they call it different things. Maybe even the concept or the procedure may be different to the one we are used to here in the UK. So door to door. But anyway, this is, we have, when it's used metaphorically, doors, we have al-intikhabat ala al-abwab. Elections are in their way. What's this? Linguistic problems mainly. Arabic is an explicative language, while English is more elliptical. Happened 1997. We have these terms which are explicitated in the translation. The end. Okay. Last thing. Oh, okay. The conclusion and then the references. Well, the conclusion. I think we need more to be done. Establishing criteria for choosing between alternatives. Choices in translation should be made for what is better through evaluating alternatives. Compiling dictionaries and glossaries and revising the existing ones. This is important. Revising the existing ones. Standardization. Everybody's talking about this. For the standardization, I have one example, and my colleagues from Algeria, please forgive me, but for example, in Lebanon, when they say مبسوط means happy. In Iraq, مبسوط means well beaten. In Libya means rich. Yes. For, you know, I'm fast. I mean, in Lebanon also they have, when they say barad, means fridge. In Libya, barad means teapot. Teapot. I'm fascinated with the don't disturb on in the hotels. So these in the Arab countries, the ones don't disturb, please don't disturb, different versions, you see. Some of them very interesting. I have the one from Algeria. Can you guess? Don't disturb. What is the well-established expression? Don't disturb in the hotels. لا تزعج. الرجاء عدم الإزعاج. But I found different in Algeria, Tunisia, Qatar, and I welcome any contributions from other countries. In Algeria, they say, and correct me, this is real one, الرجاء عدم الإضجار. الإضجار. So, من ضجر. I think this is very creative. Thank you. Thank you.
I promise that if any question comes from the audience about how you obtain this while doing research on electoral terminology, I will block it.
No, this is about standardization. Okay.
All right, questions. All right.
Thank you very much, Professor. Actually, this is a very fabulous, presentation, and you reminded me of one of the issues that I tackled in my PhD, and I think it's still a dilemma going on, which is the problem of the disagreement among legal translation scholars on a particular term, if there is a term in English that has got different options in Arabic. I think this is a real problem, and I do remember I got the term hila, and there's about 4 or 5 different options in English. Artifice, legal artifice, substitute, stratagem, deception, etc., etc. So let me, if you allow me, let me actually make use of this lovely conference, and since I am surrounded here by experts of legal translation, experts of lawyers and legal translators and legal translation scholars from different Arab countries, why don't we, my suggestion is, why don't we think about creating a corpus, since we've got the input for that, creating a corpus, trying to give terms, for the Islamic legal terms, okay, try to translate them into English, i.e. using a particular legal term, the legal term that we think is the most appropriate. I know that there are different legal situations and different legal, but as a general term, like the ones
Rafat, sorry, do you have a question for Zakiya?
No.
Otherwise, we'll take this to the general discussion.
Yeah, this is a suggestion just.
Okay. Do you have a question for Zakiya? Okay, all right. So, Hanim?
I think the comment was similar to what Rafat mentioned.
Yeah, if it is a question to Zakiya.
It's about a comment on standardization.
Okay.
We all talk about it, but we always forget the challenges behind it, given the sheer amount of knowledge we have about every category, every textile, every domain, if you like. And then Annalise was saying it would be easier and better if we collectively do something about it rather than speaking about standardization.
Yes.
Something that
May I just I think this is the job of مجامع اللغة العربية. It's not working, I know, because we have a different مجامع.
But then I have a technical question for you, and then there's a question over there. Is especially on the issue of elections, right? Since there is no pan-Arab election, I mean, there is no, for instance, the League of Arab States doesn't have an elected body for which you need to have a collective electoral exercise, right? It's not that you have to agree that you need to have a one shared lexicon for the elections, because there's no one single time in which you're actually exercising the right to vote for a general pan-Arab institution. Why do you think that there is such a need for a standardized vocabulary specifically in this domain, since all the various electoral legislations vary from country to country, and the institutions that you can elect vary from country to country?
But the principles are the same for elections.
No, but they're not.
Sorry?
They're not. I mean, the way in which you elect, the kind of vote that you're given, the district, the jurisdiction, they vary tremendously from country to country. They're so country specific that, I mean, I would understand if there were, like, for instance, an Arab parliament, right? Just like the EU parliament for the Arab League. So you would want to have a general shared vocabulary because, okay, we're holding elections on the 25th of November. But in this context, since there is no such body.
Well, I'm talking about the terminology used, like in the one in the Arabic lexicon glossary I talked about, where a collective effort, produced this glossary. When I went through it, I didn't see any reason for why we have these variations. I mean, in Iraq they say so and so. In Tunis they say so and so. But there is nothing. Nothing has to do with the substance. It's only sometimes just one word is missing. Sometimes it's just fronting, and I mean, it has nothing to do with the substance of the system. For the dictionary like this, or for a glossary like this. I'm not talking about the law, about the. I'm talking about vocabulary choice in such a.
But why is diversity a problem?
This is not diversity. This is lack of a standardization. People will get confused.
But it's not that an Algerian will vote in Lebanon.
Sorry?
It's not that an Algerian will vote in Lebanon and will be confused by the electoral law of Lebanon.
But I mean, we always claim that Arabic is one language, culture. We have one culture, we have one language, we have one religion, and then.
So I have been moderated by the moderator, who says that. Okay, Mohammed.
There are several. There was a question. Could everybody who wants to ask a question put their hand up, please?
So there's
1, 2, 3, 4.
Well, there was Muhammad, but I don't know if he changed his mind.
Because you took it from my tongue, actually.
Okay, all right.
No, but I want just to ask, actually, I mean, in a demography which has like 400 million human beings, like in Watan Al, what we call Watan Al, where every country has its establishment of political life. Actually, I want just to second what Jamal was saying. Why do you feel like there is a need for somebody in Lebanon to understand election vocabularies in Tunisia and in Morocco? So, culturally speaking, when they have a political system in Lebanon which is tailored to their own need and to their own understanding, unlike probably Iraq, which is different from even Syria, which is their neighboring country. So, is it right to speak about Arabics?
I'm glad you mentioned
one Arabic?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Lebanon and Iraq. Okay, from my experience, in a room like this during the election in 2012, there were translators from different parts of the Arab world, plus some Arabists from foreigner translators. Because of the volume of the translation, the volume of the work was given to me was too large. The IFES, the company based in New York, the dispute resolution company, took some of my material and sent it to Lebanon. And also they recruited an Iraqi specialist, consultant from the UN, gave them some of the material to translate, and then they brought it back and gave it to me to look at it. Actually, I found some different expressions that even contradict with what we have in the system. So why not we have the standardization and establish exactly a system which help all. So because we translate into Arabic. Arabic is one language. But I'm not talking about dialects. And the examples I brought, I talked about earlier from dialects.
No, I'm not speaking about dialects. I'm speaking, I mean, here the method for the example that you are asking. Don't you think that it might be wrong to ask one person from the Arab country to translate to the rest of the Arab countries?
I mean, if a Lebanese agency translates for Libyans, and when I reviewed it, I found some terms are not used in our system.
We're on the same page.
Yeah, I mean, this is because of lack of standardization, and this is another effort.
It might not be a lack of standardization, but the problem is to give it to a Lebanese agency. It's like giving Italian to a Spanish agency.
No, not exactly like that. Italian and the Spanish, they speak different languages. But
I mean, to decide that they're going to translate in the same Neo-Latin at another epoch. I mean, it's maybe the problem is not in the fact that we need a standardization, but that the West sees that all Arabic is the same, and that if we're going to give it to a Lebanese agency, it's going to be the same for Libyans.
The standard Arabic in which we write is all the same. All the same. If you talk about classic Arabic or even modern standard Arabic, it's the same. It's the same language. And we translate.
A lawyer would disagree, but not just for Arabic, but for any language. But now I'm going to be the moderator of the moderator, and so I'm just going to collect the questions.
I find, you see, so much false pride as we have in India as well. The idea of Hindi would be the national language, still carry on with English. And similarly in Arab countries, why not adopt an election for everybody? The election itself, we know we are colonized, you see, and we have to adopt the colonizer expression as such. But I think there is a false pride as such, and I think it should be election all over the Arab country. What's wrong with that?
Yeah.
I'm just astonished at the false pride in this.
Okay, as the microphone travels, so you would want to have elections or the word for elections?
Yeah, I said.
So, no. We're going to collect the questions. and you can respond
I think
after.
it follows on from some of the earlier comments, but I think one of the things with I just have 2 points on it. One is regarding acronyms. Even in the English language, acronyms are fairly recent developments. It's not that you find it in ancient legal texts or early legal texts in English. So I don't think we've come that far yet in Arabic texts to have a convention of acronyms. And you have this.
Why not adopt it?
Yeah, I mean that's one option. The thing is also you don't also I think there is a parallel also with the rise of acronyms with the rise of international organizations. This is why we don't call it. This is why we call it WIPO and not UN, because it's just a mouthful. And with the rise of these international organizations, we've had to adopt these acronyms. That's the first point. The second point is about the standardization. And again, this is largely being pushed actually by international organizations. The standardization project, if you look at UNDP Arab states, for example, they work across the large majority of Arab states, just as IFES does, just as UN International IDEA does. So when you're working across a large majority of Arab contexts and you have, let's say, elections, what you're going to try to naturally do is apply things that you've already done elsewhere into those contexts. And you're going to then borrow. And so the idea of legal borrowing in both constitutional law and international law and now in domestic law is something that we're just going to have to deal with. The discrepancies will be there, and I think there it's up to the translators and those who are native to that context to then highlight the nuance there. Because only if you are from a federal system will you know which electoral terms will be relevant to a federal government system. If you come from a monarchic constitutional system, you will have certain terms that do not belong in federal constitutional or electoral terms. So there, I think you don't have any easy option. You have to know the context there, and to that extent, you have to fight against standardization. Otherwise, you will get an amalgamation of the two, and that's not going to work.
Have I forgot someone on this side? No. So you can respond.
I haven't taken notes,
yeah.
But I mean, I take the last one here. I'm talking about simple things, actually. Like, for example, in Iraq, they have the term liwa. Liwa, I know liwa for province. We don't use this term. What we know is about when we heard the word liwa is liwa al-Iskandarona, for example, which is in the media. But we don't use the term. If the word liwa means mudiriya or means muqata'a, why we don't use in electoral terms one of them? So we know exactly how large it is, what it includes, and so on. I don't think there's any harm in this. We will not be imposing on people to use a certain term which will be offending or against the political system. I don't know if this is...
So, please join me in thanking Zakiya.
Thank you.
You were worried that I had more questions.